Welcome to the Mando Fan Show. Happy weekend, everybody. I'm John. Hoey. That's my name. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is our last Mando Fan Show, like the 1.5 season of Mando Fan Show, if you want to call it that. Covering the final episode of Disney Gallery about the connections before we return in October for the real full slate of the Mando Fan Show, where we'll be bringing back all the good stuff, the Pedro Pascal face scale, the Mando code giveaway, your tweets, Mando Fandos, and great guests, and all that stuff. And joining me on that journey, who are here with me today, as always, is James Baney and Lacey Gilleran. The documentary is over. That's it. It's all over. And this, I'm not a recency guy usually, but this was my favorite episode of the documentary, for almost like more of a personal reason than, oh, wow, I learned a lot of things. But we're going to start by getting into our favorite parts and stuff like that. But just initially, what do you guys think of the episode in a one sentence snippet, if you will?
I agree. Favorite episode.
It wasn't my favorite. I still like Practical better. I feel like because it had like actual substance to it, whereas this one I felt was very like, look at all the things we did for you. Look at them all. That's the vibe I got from it.
All right.
I have to watch it again. I've only watched it once, but it felt like very much like, look at this and look at this and look at this and look at this.
So, Lacey, since you hated the episode, why don't we start with you about what was your favorite part of the episode or standout part that
I'm trying to think of a specific moment. I really enjoy doing these episodes after I watch it because then I don't have to think as hard. Come back to me.
Ooh,
I got mine.
All right, James, go ahead.
Finding out that the X-Wing at Galaxy's Edge was the X-Wing they used.
Oh, I knew you were going to say that.
Absolutely 100%. Yeah.
So what about that? Was it the shock factor? The fact that you've seen it in person, you're like, Dave Filoni's been in that? Or like, what was the...
Yeah, like the part of it is, I mean, the pinned tweet on my Twitter feed is me in front of that ship. I remember obviously taking that photo, and I remember thinking like, oh, this is so cool. This is the X-Wing up here. And I don't know. It was crazy to me because that I would have never put those two things together. But that's the kind of stuff that I think is like really cool in both factors. If you know that it's the thing, and then you go to Galaxy's Edge for the first time, you have that fact and you think it's really cool. But it's also really cool when you didn't know and you were like just interacting with it and thought it was cool on its own, and then it like gained so much more after that.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the hey, we're gonna add a character in the background versus like, hey, that character in the background was always Rex or something. It's like, oh, there's something extra added all of a sudden out of nowhere. So I really got a kick out of that.
I feel like when we first talked about Galaxy's Edge, we were talking about that Kylo Ren, like TIE Echelon or whatever it is. And I remember you saying, James, that you were like, I wish I knew this ship so that when I went there, I was like, oh, there's the ship. Well, now you do that. Congrats.
Well, now it's going to be harder to take photos in front of it because Filoni fans are going to be like, oh, Filoni.
This is our ship.
Potentially, yeah.
I have a favorite moment I remembered.
All right, go ahead.
My favorite moment is the same part, but not for the same reason. I liked that part because Filoni said that Jon Favreau was harassing him about being in the scene with all the other directors. And he said, if I didn't do it, like, and the fact, just the way he thought about it was like so funny when he was like, okay, well, I have a flight, so I have an out that I don't have to do this.
Yeah.
And then he's like, but then I knew Jon Favreau would just keep harassing me. And John was like, yes.
Pros and cons. Like,
yeah.
It's just funny to me because I think we all go through those moments where we have a friend that's like, oh, let's do this. And you're like, and then you're like, oh, I have to do it because they want me to do it.
Yeah, it's almost like a little bit like when you make a plan months in advance and then the day arrives and you're like, I don't
I
want to do this
could get
anymore.
out of this. Yeah,
Yeah.
I could. Here are my
Um,
options.
So it's funny you say that because my favorite part is in this area too, but also a little bit different. My
If
favorite
this
part
was
that
a Facebook video, you'd see the like climber
So,
right
yeah.
around this section.
so you know the whole episode. I wrote this in my review. Like I noticed myself smiling or laughing throughout the whole episode. Like I was so entertained by it. It was very charming to me. But hearing Favreau and Filoni talk about his direction to him on how to deliver his lines as the X-wing pilot when he's like
he doesn't care.
yeah, he says just act really bored and act really disinterested and casual, and then they show the clip of him doing the lines and he's like, looks like they're doing some kind of a strike or something, I don't know, and then he's like, and then we're gonna have you dive down and do this maneuver in your X-wing. I just thought that was so funny because he really does act like he's just like, looks like they're doing something, I don't know, and it's
And
like
then you find out it's not because he did that, it's because
Favreau told him to, and he's like, yeah, and I just kept feeding you these lines, and I'm like, say this one, try this one, try this one. It's just very like backyard, break out the camera, let's make a movie. It had that like home, making your own home movie vibe to it, like your kids in the backyard making their Super 8 films or
Which
whatever.
they say that
Yeah,
in
and
this
but
episode.
it's legit. Like you get that feeling, and like James, your favorite part too, about them having to use that X-wing because they didn't have the built-up cockpit. That is like 1977, 1980 Star Wars right there. It's like
Imagine you're the park person.
what
You're
do we-
like, no, and they're like, we just need to cut it in half.
yeah, right. We
Just
need
let
to
us
Yeah.
chop
far
this thing
away.
up. But it's like we need to figure out how to make this work, and it's so funny because it's such a high-budget show and it's a Disney product, and like, all right, well, we didn't factor that in, so how are we gonna make this work? Like that is so charming to me, and I love that. It's that's what makes Star Wars so great, and maybe leads to one of my other favorite parts is when Filoni was talking about. I guess we'll just get into it here. When he's talking about IG-88 and how kids loved it so much because he said this actual word, so we don't need to bleep it out. He's like, that thing is so badass because it doesn't move and he's stoic and he's this cool assassin.
And
And
he
he's
doesn't
like,
do anything.
it didn't do anything because it was bolted to the floor and it didn't move because they weren't able to move it back then. But kids don't see that. They see this that he's
Right.
like this calm, cool droid and stuff like that. And I like the limitations that they have that make things cool inadvertently. You know what I mean?
Like how they
Mhm.
said all the characters they chose were the characters that your older brother left behind.
Amazing. Because
Yeah.
you relate to that so much because I was the older brother and my brother didn't get to play with all the cool toys. I don't know, James, were you and your brother like action figure guys as kids?
By the time I really have any recollection of like my brother, he was already in the military. So
Okay.
yeah, he had joined the military when I was 6 years old.
So you got all his old toys.
Yeah, well, yeah. So basically, I did have like the full Millennium Falcon and other stuff like that.
That's
But
pretty
the
sweet.
thing is that by that point too, they were also like really old and missing tons of pieces and stuff.
Mhm.
I literally remember I had what are they called? The snow speeders from Hoth.
Yeah.
And there's a big like open section on the side for like 21 AA batteries or something, you know?
Oh,
Like,
yeah. Yeah.
It just took a lot of batteries. I remember it was probably like 2D or maybe like 4 AA or something.
Or C's, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, C's probably. Yeah. Actually, it probably was C's because they stopped using C's. You guys notice that?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of an older thing. Lacey's like, what are you talking about? But no, yeah, I understood what they meant when they were saying that though, for sure.
Right.
I'm a middle
Lacey,
child,
did
so I
you
totally know
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, did you have because you were, you're more of the comic book and nerdy stuff. Were your sisters like that? So did you guys share toys or was it a different animal for you guys?
My sisters didn't share anything. No, it was a little different because I was definitely more into this stuff than they were. But if there were things that we were both into, so like as an example, Mario Kart, I would never get to play certain characters.
Oh
Or,
yeah.
like if we were
yeah.
playing a board game, like the pieces that you play with, I could never be specific pieces because my older sister was that piece.
Yeah.
Like stuff like that. But
In Monopoly,
nothing
you
like,
always have to be like the iron or the thimble.
yeah. It can't be the car.
Can't be the
Can't
car.
be the car.
Can't be the car.
Yeah,
That's great.
so it's, I don't think it was necessarily like I got hand-me-downs, but like, I don't know. I think my little sister felt that probably more than me because I was the one that was above her.
Yeah. But you know, all it's such a silly thing because more often than not, and this was the main point of my review, was that we're so focused now for some reason on everyone trying to prove how well they know Star Wars, you know? That's like a big thing now. Like,
Yeah, I feel that like my whole life, John.
well, I mean, like Joseph Campbell and Kurosawa and themes and all this stuff, and then like Jon Favreau and Filoni are like, you know, we know how to tell stories, but this is all about getting all your action figures together and using your imagination and playing with them. And we got to do that in Star Wars. And it's just like, it brought me back to the purest reason why I loved Star Wars, like playing with those action figures and like being like, all right, well, this is going to happen here and this one's going to go there. And they made a Star Wars show with that mentality. And I think that is so pure and so Star Wars to me that it erased any kind of like modern drama feeling I've had over Star Wars. It's like it brought it back to its simplest form. And I like that a lot. The innocence.
Yeah, there's something comforting about the way Jon Favreau handles it, where he's just like, this is what I like and this is what I'm doing, and if you don't like it, okay, but this is what I like. And then like all the moments even during this series specifically, like where Filoni be like, this is from this moment on this day and this thing, and Jon Favreau's like, I just picked it because it looked cool. Like I didn't think about this. And I know that you know, I've kind of felt this recently with all the trivia stuff that we've done and like all this other stuff. It's like, as a female fan, sometimes you feel more judged than others of like what you know. So to see an episode where it's like, it literally doesn't matter. None of this matters. It's all for fun. It's nice. It's comforting that no matter how you like Star Wars and what you like about Star Wars, it doesn't matter because it's all Star Wars. And that's the message I kind of got from Jon Favreau through this whole series, actually.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. As you were describing that at the beginning, I was thinking that I kind of see Jon Favreau like that in a way. Like he starts off and he's like, oh, we got to get the pig guy. We got to get the droid from the background. Right. We got to get the X-Wing thing, you know, like, and he goes through and he picks out all the cool stuff that like means something to him in Star Wars. Cause he knows it's
the
that
Kenner
like,
transport
thing or whatever. Yeah, exactly.
That was never used. Yeah.
Then after that, he's like, plus they're going to need like a bunch of guns and stuff like that. And that's when Dave Filoni comes in and he's like, you know, this gun has like a lot of history and stuff. He's like, I didn't know that. You know? Yeah. So I think like Dave Filoni picks up and goes even deeper, but I think like Jon Favreau was the one that like started with picking all the like personal, you know, love of Star Wars things about the show. And I think it's got to be a Boba Fett character, you know?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people that worked on it, from like Doug Chiang to all these other different types of artists and behind-the-scenes people, were like, hey, we never used this thing. Do you want it? And it reminded me a lot of like episodes ago when Taika was talking about his process and how he went to, you know, get whatever was left over from Lord of the Rings for his show. And like, hey, do you have any trash I can use? Yeah. Like this show was very similar in the sense that they were like, oh, here's a ship that we never use that folds. Here, use that. We don't use the transport. We don't use this. Like, go ahead, use that. Which is funny.
Well, I think the transport was, and I didn't know that either. I think that was Favreau from the like beginning.
The transport was Favreau because he said he had that toy as a kid that carried.
Right. I'm just saying that they're using stuff.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny because like. And this again is a theme of this documentary. I know it's just making fun of themes, but really, Favreau was like
for the deeper meaning, John.
Favreau's like hammering home the thing, like we're not George Lucas. This is his universe, and we're just playing inside it. And I feel like he has that balance. Favreau really has that balance where he's been walking along the beam, and he knows which way to teeter, which arm to stay on the path they need to be on for this show. I feel like he nails it every time, and he doesn't go over or under one way or the other. Because that quote, he says, "Because we're not George Lucas, we're just filmmakers who grew up watching it. Just because we say it doesn't mean it's cool." And I thought that was a really interesting line, which led me though to my least favorite part in the episode, which was George Lucas's appearance.
Oh my God, it was so funny.
Is your least favorite part?
Yes.
It was everything I had hoped that moment wouldn't be.
Yeah. And I think I loved, like when I saw him, I was so happy to see him.
Right.
But he seems so miserable.
Pompous.
Really?
Came across very pompous.
There's a George Lucas, if you were like watch all interviews of George Lucas from the 70s, 80s, 90s, in through the 2000s, he loves talking about Star Wars. He would talk about that Prong Gung probably, and you know, Boba Fett and stuff like that. And now he just seems so detached from everything. It almost felt like he had to be there. Like Filoni twisted his arm to show up on set, or they did it for a PR stunt. Like it kind of upset me. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I don't know.
He looked pretty closed off. He had his legs crossed, arms crossed, leaning back.
He was just kind of like, you know, when you like, we joke about this on the podcast, how like we'll say something and the other person will just like stonewall them and just like shut down the joke.
Sold.
Yeah, like stone face. That's what he did to Favreau. Favreau's like, so that was like an Easter egg. Like you that was canon, right? And he's like, not really.
See, that's the thing is like I took that exactly like he was being funny, like how they took it in the show, like they're laughing and they're really like he's like, nah, that wasn't me, you know,
I don't
kind
know.
of thing.
I
like
think that's them handling it though.
Really? Because
I think that's them taking the awkwardness and
maybe
the joke out of it, because that's how I handled those types of moments. Is like, oh, this person just totally.
But you notice, like, George Lucas is a very candid guy. Like, he does not hold back or mince words when he wants to tell you.
His whole life, he's been that way. From what we've learned from J.W. Rinsler, what I've read in books, like he never held back on saying what he thinks, which is why a lot of people enjoy working with him and like him.
Right. And you know, it has a lot to do with, like, you know, when you know somebody, but you don't know them well enough to be honest with them. So you're just you play nice. I guess. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Because
like, you're not going to be like bust someone's chops if you're not a good friend with them.
Yeah,
and I feel like George Lucas will just be like, even if he just met you, he'd be like, I don't like that. Or like just straight up honest with you.
I guess I've just like, I'm trying to think of like, it's like meeting Joseph Gordon-Levitt or something and being like, dude, I loved you in Angels in the Outfield. And he's like, of all my work, like, you know, like that's how I felt. I think,
that's fair.
I think of Favreau as like someone who like he's talked a lot about that holiday special.
He's like obsessed with it. Yeah.
The one thing we know about George Lucas is that he hates the holidays.
He wanted it like erased. Yeah.
So I see that as just a funny confrontation of like a fan that like loves the one thing that George Lucas hates. It's like a funny scenario because he's like, dude,
like,
we got the gun from the thing. You did the thing, and he's like, no. Like, you know, I thought it was hilarious, and they of course then shoot over to them after the fact, and they're like, yeah, he was like, no.
Yeah,
I don't know. I thought the whole thing was funny, but
now that you say that,
but
it makes me.
I understand it your way too, but
yeah, it makes me think of San Diego Comic-Con 2017 when I was in the Clone Wars panel, and they were talking about Yaddle and how George told Dave Filoni, like, don't ever bring up Yaddle again. I don't want to talk about it. Don't bring it up.
Yeah.
Like, and Dave was laughing about that because he was saying how adamant George was to be like, bury this. I don't want to talk about it.
Weird.
Well, I mean, it's no surprise.
Like
it's no surprise that Lucas definitely listens to criticism, even though it's his way or the highway.
Mm-hmm.
Like, look at episode 2 compared to episode 1. Like, he pretty much got rid of any talk of midichlorians.
And Jar Jar.
And he diminished Jar Jar, like, completely. When
he brought the midichlorians back for 3.
Not the way they were. It was like midichlorian city in episode 1. It was like this big thing, like this whole thing about these midichlorians and these counts and all this stuff. I feel like he he's a very sensitive guy, and I think that's a big part of why he sold Star Wars. Like,
Yeah, I mean, think about J.W. Rinsler's latest convo with us, where he said that George changed the end of the movie, like when it was already out, remember? Because based on feedback he was getting. So I could see that being a thing. But yeah, I agree with you, John. That moment, I just kind of laughed because I was like, here we were leading into The Mandalorian and then into the series. The big things we said was, can't wait to see what Baby Yoda's all about. Can't wait to see what George thinks.
yeah,
And the 2 times we've seen George is either like kind of like the back of his head or him not wanting to be there seemingly.
yeah.
It's just
yeah. But I mean, maybe James is right in that context. If they were talking about something from A New Hope, maybe he would have been more sitting upward and engaged.
Yeah.
But he just has seemed from that Charlie Rose interview, ever since he sold Lucasfilm, he has seemed like a different person to me. I don't know.
Well, it's kind of, I would imagine, and again, I'm not a crazy creative genius that's changed the course of pop culture.
Yeah.
I'd like to keep that into perspective, but
Yeah.
you know, with George or like a J.K. Rowling or someone like that, where they openly admit that they constantly have these characters kind of swimming in their head. And then JW said that George has all these journals and all these things. Like, you don't just stop thinking about this thing that you've created. You don't just stop loving it. You don't just stop. So I'm sure he made the choice to sell for specific reasons. And he made the choice to move on from that chapter of his life. But that doesn't mean he's left it behind in the sense that it's not a part of him anymore. So I could see him being kind of like, I don't agree with how they took this. I don't agree what they did here. And you just kind of get a little possessive of it, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even though it's not his, which, you know.
Yeah, I could imagine, like, I could totally understand that completely. But
it would have been nice for him to have a little bit more of a conversation in the show. Just like even a couple sentences that he's like, wow, this is so great. I've always wanted, because like, I feel like the last time we saw him in the show was him saying, oh, I've already done something like this, right? Wasn't he like very like, this is what I did for episode 2.
He was talking about the technology and what he did back then. And you know, what, he was just basically saying like, I was the guy. I was state of the art.
I think Disney Plus should just do a series, 7-8 episode series where they just interview George. Like, just interview George on what he thinks.
Well, remember, I made that big stink about the fact that they almost didn't release that interview with Filoni and George Lucas about the
You
Clone
can imagine
Wars.
how many things they have in their archives of like interviews and conversations.
And he may even be like, I don't want that out. Like, I'm done. Just
right.
But other things. All right. So moving on from Lucas, other things I wanted to bring up that I thought were cool. Obviously, the 501st thing, which everyone knew about already because they had kind of reported that a while ago when they were making the season that they.
There's a lot of drama surrounding the 501st right now. That was very interesting that they had that such big of a section in the show, but I'm sure obviously this was made before that happened.
Mm-hmm. I mean, just seeing that and seeing all them interviewed, and they're all different walks of life, all different. Races, and there's men and women, all different sizes, big people, little people.
My friend's in there.
Oh, really? That's cool.
Mark Edwards. He's a photographer. He's one of the stormtroopers at the interview. Hi,
and
Mark.
I didn't realize
you're listening.
I didn't realize. I mean, I guess it's a very complex thing on making your armor, and it's a very serious business. But I guess they were very obviously happy to be there, and very impressive, I guess, to the creators on how good their armor was and stuff. So I thought,
and they knew how to act like a stormtrooper. That's what they kept saying. Like, they didn't have to coach them. They were like, which makes me wonder, like, do they like do the weird, like most stormtroopers do in those old movies? Like, is that what they're trained to do?
One thing to remember
out of this helmet.
Yeah, one thing to remember too, John, is that, like you say, everybody knew that because we knew that back then. But like, this is on a whole other platform. I definitely know that like there's so much stuff that we knew about Mandalorian. That my family is now like asking me questions about stuff because they saw it on that show,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, yeah, I mean, do you want to talk about something that we found out about the show? It seems like the things you're latching on to, and even when we watch this whole thing, they're like, so here was the inspiration behind IG-11. We're like, we just look at it and we know. We already know. I know what your inspiration was.
Yeah.
Like, you just show me a picture and I go, okay, obviously that's either IG-88 or a new one that's clearly inspired by IG-88.
Right.
Like,
sure.
yeah. But all of this stuff to a lot of people is like, oh, dude, I didn't even know. Like, I never noticed that guy in the background, you know, or there's all these little tidbits about him being like in the cantina and stuff. It's like, yeah, I've heard those stories before, but for the general audience that just purchased Disney Plus and they mostly watch Marvel movies, but sure, they'll check out the Star Wars stuff. You know?
That's
This
fair.
all of this stuff is like deep dive, crazy stuff behind the scenes,
And
you
that's
know, and we're only looking at like 50% of it is good content to us.
yeah. I mean, and that's a perfect segue into the whole cantina section, which I found very interesting. Them replicating that for Chapter 5 to a T, and just like really rebuilding that whole bar set and that whole room, and then using half of it with the volume to fill out the rest of the room. Which again, I couldn't have told you that if I saw it, you know. So
that being said, too, I did not know that was the same droid.
Neither did I.
From Return of the Jedi, I didn't know either.
Yeah, I was like, okay, same thing that I was just describing a minute ago. It's like the same type of droid. I'm like, no, it's the same one. I did know R5 was the same.
Yeah.
Because people pointed that out pretty quickly, but I did not know that was supposed to be the same. Like
the droid
or whatever it was
who gave
Jabba's
the droids
palace.
jobs on Jabba's palace.
Yeah,
you're a feisty little one. That guy.
Yeah,
and it's so funny that they got Hamill to do it.
D9.
Yeah, 9.
That's his name.
9. Yeah,
9D9.
Yeah, I know, but it's not 99. It's 9, the letter D, and then 9.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So
No, I know you're saying it. I'm telling everybody else that
Ah.
it's easy to trip on this wording because it just sounds like you're saying 9D batteries.
I still find it funny that droid
90
had
batteries.
a gonk droid getting burned on the feet. I don't know why. Ever since I was little, I find that so funny.
Yeah. I did
like
you guys? I
steam
didn't.
coming out.
It's so funny that Mark Hamill's voiced that thing.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
They keep pulling him in to voice stuff.
Oh, he probably does it from his house.
He's very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
He's probably done like 30 characters, and they're like, just we'll hold off on telling people this one.
Well,
like
also, like
2034.
Mark
we'll be
Hamill's
like, yeah,
voice,
he voiced that character here, and everybody's like, what?
His voice has changed so much over the years. Probably because he smoked a lot and whatever. He just
age.
Age. But a lot of some people's voices stay pretty much the same their whole lives. Like that's why like Tom Hanks is 70 and still voicing Woody, you know, after 30 years. Whereas Mark Hamill's voice really sounds different, just like Carrie Fisher's did.
It sounds a lot more gravelly.
Yeah. So they probably are just like, all right, well, we can get Mark Hamill in. He's got that gruff voice now, and he can probably knock out these droid voices now.
Or years of, I mean, there's part experience here, part, you know, you're torturing your body a little bit, but years of doing voice work.
Like the Joker is a lot of voice work.
Exactly. That could have an effect on your body, but also I'm saying it in a good way too. The experience of him just being like, this is what I don't know. This is what, have you ever heard the phenomenon of people who like fake their accent for so long that they forget their real voice?
Schwarzenegger.
Is that real?
Yeah. He's from Iowa.
Anyway.
I almost had you on the hook on that one, man. Woo! No,
I know for a fact because Matt loves Arnold that he is not from Iowa.
He's not from
Iowa. I knew
no.
he wasn't from Iowa, but I was like, but he has such a distinct voice that I was like, I could see him faking his voice, and then in turn it turned into his real voice.
Though I have heard that Arnold has used a dialect coach to help him preserve his accent. I heard that's an actual true thing.
That's
interesting.
Yeah, I'm sure people do that because you have like people that are British that move here that don't want to lose the British accent.
Yeah,
but in a weird way,
started sounding American. That would suck.
Yeah, I was getting to the point that like he's so good at understanding his voice at this point, he might just be like, that's my voice. Yeah, exactly. Right. I don't know.
I hate that line so much.
I don't
have a problem with it.
I like it. I like the Register.
It's not as good as Bombs Away, but
no, it's not. No, Tally takes
again.
The taco.
People always ask me what the deal is. The deal is that her line is delivered via inside the spaceship when no one else has that sound, so it sticks out that hers sounds different. They did a weird thing where they have everybody inside the cockpit and then they shoot her from outside the cockpit, like with the glass, and her line is delivered under the glass,
Mhm.
which makes sense, but it's annoying because you have everybody else with their lines normal.
You know what's
That's
not
why I hate
annoying?
Me?
R5D4, not
Oh.
annoying. I really liked Filoni's direction on that about the motivator and wanting the oil leaking and the burn marks on that
Right.
slot. Even though I don't even know if you see it when he rolls by, but the
Right.
fact that they wanted it there just because it should be there is it's awesome. It's like when, like, James, you are a world famous rock star, and you had those things called like runners, the dressing room. What like Van Halen would ask for only brown M&Ms, not because they wanted only brown M&Ms, but if they got that right, they knew they got all the other stuff right. And I feel like that's kind of like when with the Mandalorian, like we got to get these little details right, even if they're not going to be on camera, because that's how it should be. And it makes me as a fan feel like then they're getting the big things right too. It's almost like one of those like reassurance things.
You know, my favorite part about the R5 thing is that Favreau was like, there's like a whole story about him like being tied to the rebellion and all this stuff. And Filoni was like, yeah, that's stupid. He didn't say that, but you got the feeling that he was like, yeah, I know they write that stuff. But what's funny about that is that was old Legends canon. And then from a certain point of view, retold that story and made it canon. So it is official. And it's just funny because even someone who's probably told more canon stories than anybody else, thinks it's kind of a dumb
I would
story.
love to have some type of series or interviews where they interview like Filoni or I don't know, Matt Martin or just people at Lucasfilm about what they don't like what decisions they did not agree with.
Yeah.
I'd find that super, super interesting.
I actually asked that to now I can't think of his name, but the writer for Rise of Skywalker. Chris Terrio, yeah. I jokingly, he was like, man, I would send stuff to the story group and they'd be like, that is a boneheaded idea. And I'd be like, what was some of your boneheaded ideas? And they're like, we will tell those later. Yeah, I know. I knew it was going to work, but yeah.
I find Filoni throughout this whole 8-episode thing, I've liked him a lot better than I used to. I've been more endeared to him, but I think it's because of his personality. And I don't think he takes Star Wars as seriously as I thought he did.
And as everyone thinks he does.
Right. It's very surfacey for him. He gets it completely, and he's a wonderful storyteller, and he does it right. Like the whole, everyone's going to talk about that Qui-Gon explanation for the next 50 years. But he gets what it is, and he keeps going back to that thing that it's for kids. It's about family. It's about finding your family and finding your place and coming of age. And he gets all those simple beats and what the story is. It's a fable. It's a morality tale, and he completely gets that. So I don't know. I really like seeing him talk about it in that way because, again, that whole thing, like he even mentions it. Like everyone wants to think that we need to reinvent Star Wars and stuff. He's like, you don't need. It's already there. Like we're just telling stories in that space. You don't need to reinvent it. And
I like that they keep saying it's for kids. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like the big thing for me because I feel like and I'm sure I'm guilty of this at times too, is like, it's meant so much to me throughout my life that I just kind of be like, oh, this is like my thing. I really enjoy this. But at the end of the day, it's not about me. It's not about what I want. It's not about what any of us want. It's for the next generation of kids that are growing up that I was that generation a while ago.
Like Bennett. We got to get Bennett into Mandalorian. So for those of you not watching on YouTube, James's son Bennett is joining us on the pod today. James, if you had to guess, are you getting Bennett into Star Wars, by the way?
We get asked that question a lot. Like, what was your first memory of Star Wars? And I'm like, I feel like the cheap answer to me, I feel like I'm cheaping out on people when I answer, I don't really remember. I can give like some things, but I don't really know if that was like my first memory.
Right.
Because it always just kind of existed. And I was like, there's no way Bennett is going to have a first memory of Star Wars because it's always going to be there. It's always going to be around.
It might be you liking it.
No, I understand. Like, I know inevitably there will be one thing that is like, I have this very specific memory of this, and that's probably the earliest one I have. But there is never going to be a moment where he's like, oh, I've never seen Star Wars. I don't know anything about it. And then like, boom, like all of a sudden he's introduced to it. And I see that a video a lot, like, hey, my 6-year-old's watching Star Wars for the first time. I'm a proud dad or whatever. But like, that's just not going to happen. Even yesterday, Bennett like walked up and he was like, the bathroom door was closed and he wanted to like knock on the door to see if Darth Vader was in there. And I was like, okay, let's knock. And he's like, 10 times. We knocked 10 times. Then he opened up the door and sure enough, he had put like one of his action figures in the thing. And I was like, oh my gosh, Darth Vader is in there.
Oh, that's cool. I don't know. Who would he like from Mandalorian if you had to guess?
He would probably like IG-11, probably just because of the voice and the silliness, I guess.
Because he's a stoic assassin.
Yeah, no, just probably that his lines are funny.
Yeah,
he's trying to move my camera right now,
and they talk about that. They talk about Taika delivering his lines and stuff and all that, and they really touch on a bunch of things here. But I mean, I don't have a whole lot else other than that. In general, this episode really like made me smile and made me laugh and remembered why I love Star Wars. Like, because being a fan of Star Wars today is like controversial in some spaces, and it's just like exhausting and annoying, and a lot of it's social media based. I get that, but even fans who aren't on social media are like, man, Star Wars fans suck. Like, Star Wars fans are the worst. And, like, I don't know anyone who could watch that episode, and whether you love The Mandalorian or like The Mandalorian or whatever, and not be like, what the hell is wrong with me? Like, why am I fighting about this stuff? Like, this is what it's supposed to be, I don't know.
I think ultimately the fighting boils down to people taking things personally because it means so much to them. I think that's ultimately what usually the fighting stems from.
Yeah, I agree. I just hope that people can, like, to me, this was like a palate cleanser type of thing. Like, when I
get that, and I understand why you guys say it's your favorite. I don't know. I still love the practical stuff, but that's my own
Yeah, I haven't even really said it. Like, I think immediately, like, one of the reasons I thought this one was my favorite is because if you're listening to the podcast, you know what I love about Star Wars. I love the connectivity. I love reading the comic and then being like, oh, it's the guy from the movie, or vice versa.
Yeah.
And as soon as, it's funny, throughout the history of this show, we've always called it the Easter eggs. But when this episode came up and they're like, the connections, I was like, oh, that's probably even a better term, because I don't think they're trying to hide IG-11.
Right.
It's not an Easter egg, it's a connection. And I'm like, yeah, watching these guys want to build a show around the things that to make sure that the stories all fit together and it's all part of the same world and the same feel and tone and all that stuff is like, yes, that's why I love this episode for sure. And real quick too, we haven't talked about the blurgs and the ice cream maker thing. I wanted to ask Lacey what she thought about Jon Favreau thinking the highlight of Celebration is the running of the Wilrow Hoods. It's the highlight. Everybody goes crazy.
Did he say it's the highlight?
He did.
Yes.
And my favorite part was Filoni being like, no, it is not.
I wouldn't say highlight. Yeah.
I was just surprised Favreau knew about it.
I'm sure Filoni told him. I'm sure it wasn't something that like he knew from being at Celebration. I'm sure someone told him that that's what they do with it.
Oh, I meant more of like the phenomenon of Wilrow Hood and the ice cream maker, because that's why he put it in the show, because he thought it was like this cool thing.
Yeah, I think he knows about that. I think.
Yeah. I'm saying specifically about Celebration. I think someone told him.
And that's another part that bummed me out. Like, it made me realize we're not going to Celebration.
Favorite episode.
I love that you're like,
here.
This is the best thing. All these things are great, but that's another thing that bummed me out.
No, but like, you can like something and be like, oh, but that makes me sad about this. And it made me realize we're not going to Celebration, We're
not going to Celebration for 2 years.
Yeah.
Woof.
Yeah. Crazy. Absolutely crazy.
It's devastating for me.
Yeah, it is. The other thing I wanted to bring up too is, which this was interesting to me, how they dialed back the special effects for like the Quarren species because they didn't want it to be too good.
Davy Jones, like Pirates of the Caribbean, they were like,
Yeah.
no, don't do that.
Yeah, he's like, we got to make it look like the Quarren from Return of the Jedi, and
Right.
and that sort of thing. So that's a different kind of connectivity. It's not an in-canon connectivity. It's a visual connectivity, because this is only 5 years removed. It would be weird if Quarren looked that differently from what happened 5 years ago at Jabba's palace. So
yeah, I liked how they kept dialing it back. They were like, oh no, that's too advanced. Let's bring it back.
it's just like another awareness, which I really appreciate.
And that speaks for the Blurgs as well, because they were like, their stop motion looks bad.
Yeah.
Goodness, Bennett. Stop motion looks bad. We could make it look better, but you know what I'm saying? But it doesn't feel right. It lost its liveness.
I agree. It's because I remember when I first saw the Blurgs running over those gaps in the second episode, I was like,
that
looks
weird.
Little,
and that's why. Yeah.
And that's why they did it on purpose. Like, everything was for a reason. So do you guys have any final thoughts on this episode? And then we'll do a final thoughts on this series as a whole. So for this episode, any final thoughts?
My final thoughts are, I hope Favreau sticks around after The Mandalorian, and I really hope he continues to develop more series, even if he's not the director or writer, with Dave Filoni. I think they're like, if anything, this series has convinced me they're like the dream team that we've been waiting for with Star Wars.
Oh, I completely agree. Yeah. I feel like their relationship is tighter than what I thought it would be.
Right. We thought it was kind of at the beginning going to be maybe a little combative because like one has one view and one has the other view. Yeah. It is not like that at all. And I don't mean combative like obviously like fist fighting, but like maybe a little pushback, being like, no, that's not what this is. And all I've learned through this series is that Filoni's like, that wouldn't work, but here's a way that it could work. Like he's not very like guarded of canon, where I feel like often fans are. Here's Dave Filoni being like, nah, we could do this. It doesn't matter. It's cool. Whatever.
And how many times does Filoni say something like, I can't believe we were doing this. This is so stupid.
Yeah. Like him being in the X-Wing, being like, I don't want to be doing this.
There's so many times in this documentary where he has said, like, are we seriously doing this? This is so stupid.
or the Ugnaught thing. We didn't talk about that. The fact that the initial thing was for the character to be subtitled, and they were going to do the pig voice.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah, and they were like, dude, this is going to be awesome. And then, like,
with D. Bradley Baker, right? He was going to do
yeah.
He was doing, like, the temp voice, at least, yeah.
But they had a guy in a pig mask and a guy in a regular mask, and it was subtitles, and they were like, this is so stupid.
He's like, there's no human element here whatsoever.
I thought it was great because even Favreau, is as great as we praise him, and, I mean, he's an amazing director and producer, he still was like, I thought that was going to work, and Dave, you were unsure, but thank you for letting me find it on my own. Because Dave's like, I don't know, I guess we could make this work, and Favreau just being like, it's not working. Like, I get it. I see it.
Yeah. Right. No, yeah. So, I mean, that whole tandem of theirs, it was very cool knowing that Filoni was such a resource for Favreau, and that also he had more respect for him than I thought, I guess. They were more on an even plane than I had anticipated.
Right.
He really respects his knowledge and understanding of Star Wars and all that. So, and
I think
like
that's
you said,
Favreau.
It's a dream team.
Him. Yeah.
I agree. They're a dream team. My final thought too, and then James, give us yours. But my final thought is I hope that they could continue working on Star Wars together, because it really could be something special. But we'll see. We talk about this more on next week's podcast. But James, any final thoughts before we put a bow on the Mando fan show until this fall? You're muted.
Anything?
Yeah, I am. So was I unmuted? Okay.
Welcome to quarantine.
Why was I muted? I don't know.
I don't know.
I am excited that the show is I'm not excited. Sorry. That the show is ending. But I know that Mando season 2 is right around the corner, and that's really the crux of what we do. Yes, I do see a kitty cat in the mirror. It's you.
Bennett, are those your final thoughts?
Yes.
All right. James, why don't we get... All right, so I'll just let James say what his social media handle is, and then we could say goodbye to James. James, where can people find you?
Twitter and Instagram at Myra Trunks.
All right.
And apparently chasing a little kitty cat around because I don't know.
All right.
Hi, Bennett.
Lacey, where can people find you?
People can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Lacey Gilleran.
All right. And you guys can find me on Twitter at Johnny Hoey and at StarWarsNewsNet.com. If you want to check out my written review of this episode, you can check it out over there. And thanks to everyone who's watched this kind of pseudo run of the Mando fan show. We weren't going to bring it back. And then Lacey was like, we should do it. And then we did.
I like behind the scenes. Whoever said that online, take a drink right now.
So we hope you guys enjoyed this. But remember, this fall, when Mando Season 2 comes back, we're going to bring back the Mando fan show full bore. So that means the Pedro Pascal episode rating face scale. We're doing the Mando code. We're going to be doing another cool giveaway for you guys where we give away something each episode. We're going to be doing the Mando Fando tweets. So we're going to get your tweets on the show. And, of course, some awesome guests. So we can't wait to bring that back in October. And thank you to all of our patrons at patreon.com/Resistance Broadcast. Every one of our Resistance officers from Tier 1 to Tier 5, you're the reason why this show exists and the full version as well. So we really appreciate all of your support. And to everyone out there listening and watching, because if you weren't listening or watching, what would be the point of doing this, right? So we really appreciate everyone out there. And we'll see you guys on the Resistance Broadcast on Monday morning with another episode. So until then, see you around, kids.